to not have their downtown movie theater, it's a sign that community, that there's something wrong.
There was a big void in town without the theaters.
The community really missed the camaraderie of having a theater.
Without that option, even though you may only go to the movie once a month or twice or three times a month, you had that theater to go to.
Back around the turn of the century, Grinnell had upwards of 6 or 7 playhouses, movie houses.
Big city life never meant much to me. I've always been one for space. I like the gravel roads and good company, the midday sun on my face.
So listen, look at this.
Big city life never meant much to me. I've always been one for space. I like the gravel roads and good company, the midday sun on my face.
Grinnell's Strand Theatre was established in 1916 and has left an impact across generations.
It was a part of our entertainment because there just wasn't television.
We could go to 2, 3, or even 4 shows with matinees.
We always looked forward to the weekends because we always went to the movies.
Well, a lot of them were black and white back in those days.
Every weekend and most weeknights, the theaters, we had 2 theaters at the time, they would be filled. Every seat would be taken.
We came so many times I cannot remember what the first movie was.
B movies,
Remember all the Star Wars movies?
The cowboy movies and
the westerns.
You know, westerns, of course.
I remember going to the theater with my grandmother to see On Golden Pond.
The serials,
the mystery movies at the Strand Theatre on Sundays.
cartoons.
Because it was shortly after World War II, there were still quite a few war stories.
You had Pathé News.
They had what they called before the main movie, they had News of the World.
That was a little newsreel that preceded the main feature.
And that was about the only way that we knew what was going on in the war years in the early 40s.
It did give you some clips of what was going on in the war.
In the Pacific and in the European theater.
Both in the World War II and the Korean War.
It was always nice to watch those, and they lasted about 5 or 6 minutes before the main movie.
And those would always precede the main feature and the cartoons.
Even with all the different roles that the Strand Theatre played, the golden age of this theatre did come to a close.
They finally woke up to the fact that you have to support it. It's a business, it has to be supported.
People have been driving to Des Moines, have been driving to Iowa City.
After the theater closed, it was a lot of travel in Iowa City or Des Moines.
Grinnell has everything a small town could need. There's an acclaimed institution of higher learning and plenty of businesses that call Grinnell home. But the little town that has everything needed to mobilize to resurrect a cultural loss.
There were a group of people, I think, that sort of were the catalyst for the idea that once the theater closed, that it was important that we get it going again.
The college is dedicated to making sure that the town in general is a healthy and vibrant place to live.
The greatest thing that happened here to make this a success is the fact that the community came behind it. And not only corporations involved in the investment, but individuals donated to make this a community theater, if you will, owned by the community.
All the hundreds of people who have joined the Marquee Club to give their own private donations to the project is really pretty amazing.
The idea is to revitalize downtown, and that can be done in many ways, and this theater is one way to keep the vibrancy going and keep the viability of the town.
We can draw from people from surrounding communities too. People have said that the highway goes both ways, and if people can use the highway to leave town, they can certainly use the highway to come here as well.
We know that the economic impact of a threeplex is about $1 million a year, and that's people who are coming to the theater, but they're shopping first. They're going out to get something to eat afterwards. They're going out for drinks before or after. I mean, that's not just the ticket sales, it's not the popcorn, it's not the jujubes, it's people who are breathing life into downtown.
It was agreed that there was plenty to gain from the theater. Executing the plan would require extensive undertaking.
This was basically a home for the pigeons.
Back in the winter of 2000, and that's when we had all the snow. And it collapsed at that time, and the roof was never replaced.
No, they hired me to basically gut the inside of the theater and get it ready for a renovation. At first it seemed like a fairly simple task of taking down some studded walls and sheetrock and so on. But once we got it kind of cleaned out, they said, okay, now we need to have the floor taken out all the way down to the dirt basement.
When we were demoing this area, the pit was probably 10, 12 feet deep.
We were ready to compromise the structural integrity of the building, and they said, no, wait, we better not take that wall down or it might fall down.
I mean, there's a lot of transformation that has gone on in the construction process. I mean, this whole slab that used to be here.
We uncovered a 1916 heat system that was state-of-the-art back in those days. And what it consisted of was lath and plaster in the form of a tunnel up the center of the floor, underneath the floor. And then every other floor joist was opened into this tunnel, so the heat would come up the tunnel and then into the floor joists. Every other floor joist, it would go one side or the other. And then they had little steel bells on the floor, and the heat would come up and hit that bell and disperse along the floor. That in itself was very interesting, but those little bells were sort of collectors of things that got on the floor and got kicked aside. And I was really hoping to find a good number of treasures, and unfortunately we found mostly popcorn and juji fruits.
As we started demo and the plaster was coming off the walls, there was a mural, and it was always just a challenge to try to figure out actually what it said, and I don't.
We couldn't see the whole thing.
What was it?
Gold medal flower.
Gold medal flower.
Yeah.
The upper 2/3 of the building, primarily the brick structure that you see now, was covered up by, everyone will remember this, a green aluminum siding. That was pretty hideous. We couldn't believe it when we uncovered that and saw what was there.
One of the great finds was these transom windows.
The original transom window was actually in place when we started the initial demolition.
When they uncovered some of the really polished granite columns, the etched limestone carvings, the decorative elements there, we were blown away. The building to the north of the theater when it was built was the Grinnell Marble and Granite Company. So they didn't have to look far for those granite columns.
There's an old picture of the theater that was taken about the time that it was built. And you can see the Grinnell Granite Company next door, and you can see the blocks of granite stacked up outside on the sidewalk.
We did find a little, I think you call it a compact, which was a little case with a porcelain lid on it and a painting. And when you took it off, it was face powder inside, and a little powder puff. And on top, folded into a small little square, was a $5 bill. And it was a 1927 silver certificate. So obviously, if this was dropped somewhere in that area of time, it was worth a lot of money, and I'm sure she was pretty upset that somewhere she couldn't find it.
There's been at least one person that has told me that this is the first movie house that was built west of the Mississippi. It's not been substantiated, but boy, that'd be certainly neat if we could find some documentation to substantiate that.
We did find also a free pass that was given by a local shoe store, and it was good for any movie up to 15 cents, I believe.
Once the Strand was peeled down to the framework, many pleasant surprises were found. Perhaps the most historic of the finds was behind the original screen. Here, the stage proscenium was revealed.
Prior to the theater closing, nobody really knew what was back there because it was all covered up. It was covered up by the screen, and there had been a stage that had been built in front of it as well. And so nobody really knew exactly what was back there. But when we started to do the initial demolition work, we uncovered it, and we were really kind of amazed at what we found and what kind of condition that it was in. We had several discussions about whether we should save it or not. We knew that we didn't have the money to restore it, and that was not something that we could do at this time. But the question was, should we save it for the opportunity for the owners, whoever they may be in the future, to possibly restore it and then take this whole theater and restore it back to the way it was, or very similar to the way it was back when it was built in 1914 or 1916.
I think they went to great efforts to save some of the historical value of this facility.
It was a wooden floor, and it gradually raked down to about 15 or 20 feet in front of the stage proscenium. And then once you got to that point, the right half of the floor sloped up toward the stage, while the left half was flat, was level, and went all the way toward the stage there. And on that level portion on the left side, that's where a piano sat. And someone from the community would play that piano, and they would operate the lights also from that vantage point for the stage, but they would play the background music for the silent movie.
Regardless of their historical value, some of these antiques had to be replaced.
The number one improvement is the stadium seating, the acoustics. The sound travels much better up the stadium seating itself.
I mean, you'll get it all. I mean, we got the stadium seating here. We'll have state-of-the-art sound.
Boom! It was amazing.
You hear sound coming from all over the theater, in front of you and in back of you,
Shakes the room.
with big booms and loud crashes and all that kind of stuff. That's going to be exciting for people.
It'll just be a wonderful theater-going experience.
I think it's going to help the people in Grinnell to get out of their homes again and like I say, have a night out on the town.
I have 2 children, and I look forward to the times I can bring them here as a family.
It won't be the sole form of entertainment like it was back up until the late 50s and early 60s, but it will be one form that people will take advantage of.
When you're in the crowd of people that are watching it with you, I think there's some osmosis there and some camaraderie.
There's something about the aura of being in a theater.
Rising with the sun, the corn is rustling in the wind. In the fields before the grass is dry, the day's begun. Listening to the cars out on the highway passing by, freshest supper I will ever taste, the day is done. Big city life never meant much to me. I've always been one for space. I like the gravel roads and good company, the midday sun on my face. Big city life never meant much to me. I've always been one for space. I like the gravel roads and good company, the midday sun on my face.